You're not getting a penny until you admit what you've done." Those were the last words I spoke to my granddaughter before she stormed out of my library, her Louboutin heels clicking angrily against the marble floors of the estate I'd spent 40 years building. And just like that, the silence she left behind was louder than her footsteps. That was 3 months ago, and now, as I sit here dictating this story to my nurse while cancer slowly claims what's left of my 74-year-old body, I wonder if I was too harsh. But then I remember the surveillance footage, the bank statements, the lies, and I know I made the right choice. My name is Alina Ashworth, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because you've probably stayed in one of my hotels, eaten at one of my restaurants, or shopped in one of my department stores across 3 continents. What you might not know is how a seamstress's daughter from rural Kentucky became one of the most powerful women in hospitality, or how that same power nearly destroyed the person I loved most in this world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, or rather, at the end that led to this beginning. The revelation came on a Tuesday morning in September, wrapped in a manila envelope that my head of security, James Morrison, placed on my breakfast table with the solemnity of a funeral director. I was enjoying my usual Earl Grey and reading the financial reports when James cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ashworth, you're not going to like what's in there." And just like that, my world tilted on its axis before I even sipped my tea. I'd known James for 15 years. He'd been military police before joining my security team, and in all that time, I'd never seen him look quite so uncomfortable. I set down my teacup and opened the envelope. The first photograph showed my granddaughter Charlotte at the Diamond Club, an exclusive casino in Monaco. She was laughing, her arm draped around a man I didn't recognize, tall, dark-haired, expensively dressed. Nothing unusual there. Charlotte had always attracted admirers like flowers attract bees. The second photograph was more troubling. Charlotte at the same casino's private high-stakes room, pushing chips worth more money than most people see in a lifetime across green felt. The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m. But it was the third photograph that stopped my heart. Charlotte in what appeared to be an intimate conversation with Vincent Carrera, a man I'd had banned from every legitimate business I owned, after discovering his connections to money laundering operations throughout Europe. "How long?" I asked James, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "6 months that we know of, could be longer." I studied each photograph methodically, the way I'd learned to analyze hostile takeover attempts and market manipulations. Charlotte's body language, the familiarity between her and Carrera, the casual way she handled those astronomical sums, this wasn't a recent development. "The financial records?" I asked. James handed me another folder. Bank statements, credit card bills, wire transfers, all painting a picture I didn't want to see. In the past 8 months, Charlotte had withdrawn nearly $2 million from the trust fund I'd established for her 21st birthday. Money that was supposed to last her lifetime had been systematically drained through cash advances, wire transfers to offshore accounts, and payments to something called Mediterranean Acquisitions, LLC. "What's Mediterranean Acquisitions?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, owned by Vincent Carrera through a series of nested corporations." I closed the folder and walked to the window overlooking the gardens where Charlotte used to play as a child. She'd been 8 when she came to live with me permanently, after my daughter Patricia died in that car accident. 20 years I'd raised her, loved her, taught her everything I knew about business, about life, about the responsibility that comes with wealth and power. And now, all those lessons were being used against me. "There's more," James said quietly. I turned back to face him. "More. She's been using your name, telling people she's negotiating business deals on your behalf. There are contracts, Mrs. Ashworth, substantial ones." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What kind of contracts?" "Property acquisitions in Cyprus, yacht purchases, a private jet lease, all with your signature." "My signature?" I sat down heavily. "James, I haven't signed anything like that." "No, ma'am. We believe she's been forging your signature. The handwriting analysis isn't complete yet, but the preliminary results. He didn't need to finish. I taught Charlotte calligraphy when she was 12, helping her practice for hours until she could write beautifully. Apparently, she'd been a better student than I'd realized. How much are we talking about? Approximately $12 million in fraudulent commitments made in your name. $12 million. It wasn't enough to bankrupt me. My net worth was somewhere north of $800 million, but it was enough to destroy several smaller businesses if those contracts weren't honored. More importantly, it was enough to land Charlotte in federal prison for wire fraud, forgery, and a dozen other felonies. I spent the rest of that day in my office, staring at the photographs and financial records, trying to understand how the little girl who used to braid my hair and tell me about her dreams of traveling the world had turned into someone I didn't recognize. Charlotte had always been strong-willed, independent to a fault. After Patricia died, she'd gone through a rebellious phase that lasted through her teens, skipping school, staying out all night, dating boys I disapproved of. But she'd settled down in college, graduated with honors from Wharton, and seemed to have found her path working in the marketing division of Ashworth International. Or so I'd thought. The truth was, I realized now, I'd been so busy building my empire that I'd missed the signs. Charlotte's increasing absences from family dinners, her vague answers about her work projects, the way she'd seemed distracted during our monthly business reviews, checking her phone constantly, making excuses to leave early. Most tellingly, her sudden interest in the company's international operations, particularly our European holdings. She'd been asking questions about our Cyprus properties, our Monaco investments, our relationships with various banking institutions. Questions I'd answered proudly, thinking she was finally taking a serious interest in the family business. Now I understood. She hadn't been learning to take over the company. She'd been learning to rob it. I waited a week before confronting her, using that time to conduct my own investigation through channels Charlotte knew nothing about. What I discovered was worse than I'd feared. The gambling was just the beginning. Charlotte had been living a double life for nearly 2 years, maintaining an apartment in Monte Carlo that cost €30,000 a month, traveling on private jets to parties and social events across Europe, presenting herself as an international heiress with unlimited resources. And I realized, none of it was real, yet it had cost me everything. She'd cultivated relationships with some of the most dangerous people in high-stakes gambling, money laundering, and what the FBI politely called alternative investment strategies. People who didn't care where money came from as long as it kept flowing. More heartbreaking was the psychological profile my security team had compiled. Charlotte wasn't just stealing from me, she was trying to become me. Or rather, trying to become the version of me she'd created in her head. The glamorous international businesswoman who lived without rules or consequences, who commanded respect through wealth and power alone. She'd missed the part about earning that wealth through 50 years of 18-hour days, about building that power through careful relationships and unwavering integrity. She wanted the results without the work, the respect without the responsibility. When I finally called her to my library that autumn evening, Charlotte arrived dressed for battle. A black Chanel suit that I'd bought her for her birthday, diamond earrings that had belonged to her mother, and an expression of practiced innocence that would have fooled anyone who didn't know her as well as I did. "Grandmother, you look tired," she said, kissing my cheek. "You should be resting more." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down, Charlotte, we need to talk." She settled gracefully into the leather chair, crossing her legs and smoothing her skirt. "Is this about the Cyprus project? Because I think I've found an excellent opportunity for expansion." "This is about Vincent Carrera." The change in her expression was almost imperceptible, but I'd been reading people's faces across negotiation tables for half a century. The slight tightening around her eyes, the barely perceptible pause before she responded, she knew she'd been caught. "I'm sorry, I don't know who that is." I opened the folder on my desk and slid the first photograph across to her. "This was taken at the Diamond Club 3 weeks ago." Charlotte glanced at the photograph, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been relief cross her face. She'd been expecting this conversation for months, living with the stress of wondering when her carefully constructed deception would collapse. "Grandmother, I can explain." "Can you?" I slid the bank statements across next. "Can you explain $2 million in withdrawals from your trust fund? Can you explain forging my signature on $12 million in fraudulent contracts?" The practiced innocence was gone now, replaced by something harder, more calculating. This was the Charlotte I'd glimpsed in those surveillance photos, the one who could sit at a poker table at 4 in the morning, risking more money than most people made in a decade. "You had me investigated," she said, not really a question. "I had my property protected from theft. There's a difference." Charlotte laughed, a sound without humor. "Your property, is that what I am to you? Another asset to be managed and controlled?" "You're my granddaughter, the most important person in my world, which is why this conversation is happening in my library instead of in front of a federal judge." She stood up then, packing to the window, her movements sharp with barely contained energy. "You don't understand the pressure, grandmother. Everyone expects me to be like you, to have your instincts, your brilliance. Do you know what it's like living in the shadow of a leaner Ashworth?" I'd heard variations of this argument before, from competitors, from business partners, from employees who felt overlooked or undervalued. But hearing it from Charlotte, seeing the genuine pain in her eyes, cut deeper than any hostile takeover attempt ever had. "So you decided to steal from me instead of talking to me." She turned back, and for a moment, I saw the 8-year-old who'd cried in my arms after her mother's funeral. "I didn't steal from you. I borrowed against my inheritance." "Your inheritance isn't guaranteed, Charlotte, and it certainly doesn't extend to forging my signature and committing felonies in my name." Her face hardened again. "What are you going to do? Turn me over to the FBI? Destroy your own granddaughter to protect your precious reputation?" The threat was implicit but clear. If I pushed this too far, the scandal would damage both of us. Charlotte's arrest would make headlines around the world, dragging the Ashworth name through mud that might take decades to clean off. But I'd built my empire by making hard choices, by never letting fear dictate my decisions. I hadn't backed down from hostile takeovers, aggressive competitors, or economic downturns. I certainly wasn't going to back down from my own granddaughter's attempt to blackmail me. "I'm going to give you a choice," I said calmly. "You can cooperate with my security team to unwind every fraudulent transaction you've made in my name. You can provide testimony that will help law enforcement build cases against Vincent Carrera and his associates. And you can enter a treatment program for gambling addiction." "And if I refuse?" I met her eyes steadily. "Then I'll turn over everything we've discovered to the appropriate authorities and let them sort it out. Your trust fund will be frozen pending investigation. Your position with Ashworth International will be terminated, and you'll face federal charges for wire fraud, forgery, and money laundering." Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. She was brilliant. I'd made sure of that, providing her with the best education money could buy, and she understood exactly what I was offering. A chance to make things right without destroying her life completely. "What about Vincent?" she asked quietly. "What about him?" "He's not going to just let me walk away. He's invested a lot of time and money in this relationship." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like fear. Not for my money or my reputation, but for Charlotte's safety. Vincent Carrera wasn't just a white-collar criminal. He had connections to people who resolved disputes with violence rather than lawyers. "How deep are you in with him?" Charlotte sank back into the chair, suddenly looking much younger than her 28 years. "I owe him money, a lot of money, money I don't have." "How much?" $4 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $4 million in gambling debts to one of the most dangerous men in international crime. No wonder she'd been so desperate, so willing to risk everything. "Charlotte, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you ask for help before it got this far?" Her laugh was bitter. "Ask Eleanor Ashworth to bail me out of my gambling debts. Admit that I was weak, that I'd failed, that I wasn't worthy of the Ashworth name. I stood up and walked around the desk, kneeling beside her chair the way I used to when she was small and needed comfort. You are my granddaughter. You are worthy of love, forgiveness, and help. You always have been. Charlotte started crying then, real tears instead of the careful manipulation I'd been expecting. The facade she'd been maintaining for months finally cracked, revealing the scared young woman underneath. I'm so sorry, grandmother. I never meant for it to go this far. It started with just a few thousand at the casino, and then Vincent said he could help me win it back, and then you were in too deep to see a way out. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What are we going to do about Vincent? I helped her up and walked back to my desk. We're going to solve this the same way I've solved every other problem in my business career, with careful planning, superior resources, and absolute determination. And for the first time, I realized this was no ordinary family feud. This was a battle for survival. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned more about the criminal underworld than I'd ever wanted to know. Vincent Carrera wasn't just a high-stakes gambler and money launderer. He was part of an international network that specialized in targeting wealthy families, particularly those with young heirs who might be vulnerable to manipulation. Charlotte hadn't been his first victim, and she wouldn't have been his last. My security team found evidence of at least 6 similar operations over the past 5 years, each following the same pattern. Identify a wealthy heir with access to family funds, cultivate a romantic or mentoring relationship, gradually escalate their involvement in gambling and high-risk investments, then use their growing desperation to recruit them into increasingly serious criminal activities. The $4 million Charlotte owed him wasn't really gambling debt in the traditional sense. It was the cost of her education in his operation, the price of admission to a world where legitimate business and organized crime blended seamlessly together. What made Charlotte's situation particularly dangerous was that she'd learned too much about Carrera's other operations. She could identify his associates, describe his money laundering methods, and provide evidence that could dismantle his entire network. That knowledge made her valuable to law enforcement, but it also made her a liability to Carrera. I'd faced hostile situations before, but never ones where physical violence was a real possibility. This required a different kind of strategy, one that would neutralize the threat while protecting Charlotte from both criminal prosecution and criminal retaliation. I started by assembling a team. Not just lawyers and accountants, but specialists in international crime, former intelligence operatives, and people who understood how to navigate the gray areas where legitimate business and criminal enterprise intersected. The plan we developed was complex, requiring careful timing and absolute secrecy. We would use Charlotte as bait, having her arrange a meeting with Carrera ostensibly to negotiate her debts. At that meeting, she would wear recording equipment and gather evidence of his criminal activities, while my team positioned assets to seize his financial resources and cut off his escape routes. It was dangerous. If Carrera suspected he was being set up, he might react violently. But it was also our best chance of neutralizing the threat while gathering enough evidence to put him away permanently. Charlotte's reaction to the plan surprised me. "You want me to wear a wire and confront Vincent directly?" she asked when I explained what we needed her to do. "Only if you're willing. If you're not comfortable with the risk, I'll do it." Her courage shocked me. This was the granddaughter I remembered, rising from the ashes of betrayal. Her answer was immediate, firm, without the hesitation I'd expected. For the first time since this crisis began, she sounded like the Charlotte I remembered, decisive, brave, willing to face consequences for her actions. "Charlotte, you need to understand what we're asking. Vincent Carrera is dangerous, if he suspects. Grandmother, I've been lying to you for 2 years. I've stolen from you, forged your signature, and nearly destroyed everything you've built. The least I can do is help clean up the mess I've made." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation and deception I'd become so good at detecting. But what I saw was something different. Genuine remorse, determination, and perhaps the first stirrings of the woman she might still become. The meeting was scheduled for a private dining room at the Hotel Regina in Paris, a neutral location where my team could maintain surveillance without arousing suspicion. Charlotte would arrive first, followed by Carrera and his associate. My people would be positioned throughout the hotel as guests, staff, and security personnel. The night before Charlotte left for Paris, we had dinner together for the first time in months. She'd been staying at a hotel since our confrontation, claiming she needed space to think. Now, sitting across from each other at the long dining table where we'd shared so many meals over the years, the distance between us felt like more than just physical space. "Are you scared?" I asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also relieved. I've been carrying this secret for so long, pretending everything was fine while my whole world fell apart. At least now I don't have to pretend anymore." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Charlotte, when this is over, when Vincent is in custody and the legal issues are resolved, what do you want to happen between us?" She was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I want to earn your trust back. I know that's going to take time, maybe years, but I want to try." "And the business? Do you still want to be part of Ashworth International?" Another pause. "I don't know. I think maybe I need to figure out who I am separate from the family empire before I can decide if I belong in it." Her honesty was both painful and hopeful. The Charlotte who'd been stealing from me would have said whatever she thought I wanted to hear. This Charlotte was willing to admit uncertainty, to acknowledge that she might need to find her own path. "Whatever you decide, you'll always be my granddaughter. You'll always have a place in this family." She squeezed my hand. "Even after everything I've done. Especially after everything you've done. Forgiveness isn't earned through perfection, Charlotte. It's earned through honesty, remorse, and the willingness to make things right." And in that room, a fragile trust began to rebuild, a trust that would be tested like never before. The surveillance footage from the Hotel Regina looked like something out of a spy movie. Charlotte arriving first, elegant, and composed in a navy blue dress that concealed the recording equipment she wore. Vincent Carrera entering 10 minutes later with Marco Benedetti, his chief lieutenant, both men scanning the room with the practiced caution of people accustomed to danger. Every second felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. I watched from the security command center my team had established in a suite 3 floors above, listening through Charlotte's wire as she greeted the two men with perfect poise. "Vincent, thank you for meeting me. I know this situation has been complicated." Carrera's voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of an Italian accent that my intelligence people assured me was completely fabricated. "Charlotte, my dear, you look lovely as always, though I must say, you seemed rather upset in your message. I've been thinking about our arrangement, and I believe we need to restructure our agreement." Even through the audio feed, I could hear the tension in her voice. Charlotte had always been a skilled negotiator. I'd taught her myself, but this was different from any business meeting she'd ever conducted. This wasn't a negotiation. This was survival. "Restructure how?" This was Benedetti, his tone more suspicious than Carrera's carefully modulated friendliness. "My grandmother has become suspicious. She's been asking questions about my travel, my expenses. I think we need to be more careful." Carrera laughed. "Your grandmother is a formidable woman, but she's also aging. How much attention can she really be paying to your activities?" "More than you think. She's had me investigated." The silence that followed was deafening. In the command center, I watched my team tense, hands moving closer to weapons, ready to intervene if the situation escalated. "Investigated?" Carrera's voice had lost its warmth. "What kind of investigation?" "Financial records, travel patterns, security footage from the casinos. She knows about our relationship." Benedetti stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Vincent, we should go." But Carrera remained seated, his attention focused entirely on Charlotte. What exactly does she know? This was the crucial moment. Charlotte needed to provide enough information to seem credible while gathering evidence of their criminal activities. Too little, and they'd suspect a trap. Too much, and they might decide she was too dangerous to leave alive. She knows about the money I've borrowed from you. She knows about the contracts I've signed in her name. But she doesn't know about the other operations, the money laundering, the connections to Cyprus. I held my breath, waiting to see how Carrera would respond to this carefully crafted mixture of truth and misdirection. And what does your grandmother propose to do with this information? She wants me to disappear, fake my own death, essentially. Create a new identity, move to South America, never contact anyone from my old life again. It was a brilliant improvisation. Charlotte was offering Carrera exactly what he would want, the elimination of a dangerous witness, while creating a plausible reason for her to seek his help. That's actually not a terrible idea, Carrera said thoughtfully. Though it would be expensive. New documents, safe passage, establishing a new life. We're talking about significant resources. How significant? $10 million. Maybe 12, depending on how thorough the new identity needs to be. Benedetti leaned forward. Vincent, this is getting complicated. Maybe we should cut our losses. No, Carrera's voice was firm. Charlotte represents too valuable an asset to discard. Her grandmother's connections, her access to the family business. There's too much potential profit to walk away now. Charlotte pressed forward. But what if she doesn't agree to the disappearance plan? What if she decides to go to the authorities instead? Another silence. When Carrera spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the smooth charm, replaced by something cold and calculating. Then Alina Ashworth would have a tragic accident. These things happen to elderly people. Heart attacks, falls downstairs, prescription medication mix-ups. In the command center, I felt ice water flow through my veins. The casual way he discussed murdering me was almost incomprehensible. Benedetti was nodding. The grief might cause Charlotte to make poor decisions, transfer large sums of money to questionable investments, sign documents without proper legal review. Exactly, Carrera agreed. A granddaughter overwhelmed by loss, making emotional rather than rational choices about her inheritance. Charlotte's voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. You've thought about this before. My dear, we think about every contingency. That's how we've remained successful for so many years. Carrera stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Give me 24 hours to consider our options. We'll meet again tomorrow night, same time, same place. As they prepared to leave, Benedetti asked, what about her grandmother's investigation, if she's already suspicious? We'll accelerate our timeline, Carrera replied. Sometimes circumstances require immediate action rather than careful planning. After they left, Charlotte remained in the dining room for another 10 minutes, maintaining her cover in case they were watching. When she finally returned to the command center, she was shaking. Did you get everything you need? She asked. James nodded grimly. Enough to put them away for life. Conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, fraud, racketeering. We've got it all. But I wasn't thinking about the legal implications. I was thinking about how close I'd come to losing Charlotte, not just to Vincent Carrera's manipulation, but to the corruption that wealth and power could breed in people who weren't strong enough to handle them responsibly. Vincent Carrera and Marco Benedetti were arrested the next morning in their suite at the George V Hotel. The French authorities, working with Interpol, and the FBI seized assets worth more than $50 million across 6 countries. The investigation that followed would eventually dismantle an international criminal network that had been operating for nearly a decade. Charlotte's testimony was crucial to the prosecution, but it came at a personal cost. The media attention was intense and often cruel, painting her alternately as a naive victim or a calculating accomplice. The Ashworth name, which I'd spent 5 decades building into a symbol of integrity and success, became associated with scandal and crime. But the real damage was deeper than public relations. Charlotte's betrayal had shattered something fundamental between us, not just trust, but the assumption that family bonds were stronger than personal weakness. I found myself questioning every interaction we'd had over the past few years, wondering what else I'd missed, what other deceptions might still be hidden. Charlotte seemed to understand this. After the arrests, she moved out of the country entirely, taking a position with a humanitarian organization in West Africa. She called once a month, brief conversations that covered practical matters but avoided anything too personal. We were both healing, but separately. The doctors diagnosed my cancer 6 months later. Pancreatic, aggressive, the kind that gives you time to get your affairs in order but not much more. When I told Charlotte, she was on the next flight back to New York. "How long?" she asked, sitting beside my hospital bed. 6 months, maybe 8 with treatment. She cried then, not the careful tears I'd seen during our confrontation, but the raw grief of someone facing the loss of the most important person in their world. "I wasted so much time," she whispered. "I was so angry, so resentful, and now we have whatever time remains," I said firmly. "We can spend it looking backward, or we can spend it looking forward." Charlotte chose forward. She moved back into the family estate, not as the wayward granddaughter seeking forgiveness, but as the woman she'd become through surviving her own destruction and rebuilding herself from the foundation up. She was different now, more thoughtful, less certain of her own righteousness, more willing to listen than to speak. The experience with Carrera had stripped away her illusions about herself and the world, leaving something more authentic in their place. We spent my remaining months working together on the transition of Ashworth International to professional management. Charlotte didn't want to inherit the empire I'd built. She'd learned too much about the cost of that kind of power, but she wanted to ensure it would continue to operate according to the values we both believed in. "I need to ask you something," she said one afternoon as we reviewed the succession plans. "Of course. Do you forgive me? Really forgive me, not just say the words because I'm family?" I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't a simple transaction. It wasn't something that happened once and remained fixed forever. It was an ongoing choice, renewed daily, sometimes hourly. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination, and it demands courage from both sides. I forgive the young woman who was so desperate for approval that she made terrible choices, I said. I forgive the granddaughter who felt trapped by expectations she couldn't meet. I even forgive the person who stole from me, because I understand now that she was stealing from herself as much as from me. Charlotte nodded, tears streaming down her face. But more importantly, I continued, I'm proud of the woman you've become, the one who had the courage to help bring down Vincent Carrera, the one who chose truth over comfortable lies, the one who's sitting here now, asking the hard questions instead of accepting easy answers. In that room, love, redemption, and courage converged, and the past was finally reconciled with the future. I'm dictating this story from my bed, with Charlotte holding my hand and my nurse recording every word. The cancer has won, as we always knew it would, but I'm not ready to leave without sharing what I've learned about power, love, betrayal, and the complex relationships between them. Power, I've discovered, is not what I thought it was when I was building my empire. Real power isn't the ability to control others or accumulate wealth. Real power is the ability to forgive without weakness, to love without conditions, to build relationships that survive the worst kinds of betrayal. Love, true love, doesn't mean accepting destructive behavior or enabling bad choices. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, enforcing consequences, and allowing people to face the results of their actions. The hardest love of all is trusting someone enough to let them fail completely and find their own way back. Betrayal, painful as it is, can be a teacher if we let it. Charlotte's betrayal taught me that I hadn't been as present in her life as I'd believed. I'd been so focused on building something to leave her that I'd missed helping her become someone who could handle that inheritance responsibly. But betrayal also taught me about resilience, mine and hers. We both survived the destruction of everything we thought we knew about our relationship and built something better from the ruins. Wisdom, if I have any, comes from understanding that none of us are the heroes of our own stories all the time. Sometimes we're the villains, Sometimes we're the victims, sometimes. We're just confused people trying to do our best with incomplete information and flawed judgment. Charlotte squeezed my hand just now, and when I looked at her, I saw not the frightened little girl who came to me after her mother's death, nor the troubled young woman who nearly destroyed us both, but a complete person who has learned to live with her mistakes and grow from them. "Grandmother," she said, "what do you want people to remember about you?" I thought about that question for a long time. The business empire, the charitable foundations, the awards and recognition, none of that seemed important anymore. I want them to remember that love is stronger than betrayal, that forgiveness is possible even when it seems impossible, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to disappoint you completely and still be welcomed home. The sun is setting outside my window, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. Charlotte is still holding my hand, and I can feel the strength in her grip, not the desperate clutch of someone afraid of losing me, but the confident touch of someone who knows that what we've built together will survive my death. That, I think, is the real measure of a life well lived. Not what you accumulate, but what you leave behind in the hearts and minds of the people you've loved. If there's a lesson in this story, it's this: power without love is tyranny. Love without boundaries is enabling. Betrayal without forgiveness is poison. But when you combine them all, power exercised with love, love expressed through appropriate boundaries, betrayal met with the possibility of forgiveness, you get something remarkable. The chance for broken people to heal, broken relationships to mend, and broken lives to find meaning again. I won't see Charlotte's children if she chooses to have them. I won't know what she decides to do with her life, what causes she'll champion, what legacy she'll leave. But I know that whatever path she chooses, she'll walk it with integrity, courage, and the knowledge that she is loved completely, not despite her flaws, but including them. That knowledge, I believe, is the most valuable inheritance I can leave her. Worth more than money, more than property, more than all the power I accumulated over 74 years on this earth. In the end, that's what matters. Not that we never betrayed or were betrayed, not that we never made mistakes or hurt the people we loved, but that we found ways to forgive, to grow, and to love more deeply because of our failures rather than in spite of them. Our mistakes are the seeds from which the strongest love can grow. The story ends where it began, with Charlotte and me choosing love over resentment, hope over fear, truth over comfortable lies. Some battles are worth fighting, some sacrifices are worth making, and some people are worth forgiving no matter how badly they've hurt you. Sometimes the greatest victory is not winning, but knowing when to stop fighting and start healing instead. Thanks for listening. Do forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.